Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone. Welcome in on a Monday morning. Watching the sports world slowly crawl by this weekend, I thought, I can't wait for Major League Baseball to expand to Utah. Can get a little thin out there. When you have Major League Baseball, at least if you have a relevant team, it really does fill up an otherwise spotty summer sports schedule. We had a few things going on. We did the Utah Jazz in the Summer League, but Ace Bailey didn't play, and let's face it, he's the attraction. And Clayton didn't play, and Tonje didn't play. Literally all three draft picks were out, so that wasn't great. 22 points for Cody Williams. We'll see how he continues to progress. The former Ute Gabe Madsen had 22, and the Warriors beat the Jazz. Real Salt Lake played Saturday. They won. They shut out Houston, just their sixth shutout of the year, so unbeaten in their last four games. They're starting to get on a little bit of a roll here. They have a big game at Portland Wednesday night, and Portland lost yesterday to St. Louis 2-1. So maybe they can get back in they're back in the race here, but get above the playoff line and see if they can start climbing. Pablo Mastroeni, head coach, talking to the media after RSL picks up the win at home.
Tonight, second half, obviously with the ball, the standard was not up to snuff, but I think the grit, the determination, and the ability to, like you said, defend well in and around our box and defend set pieces was a big step for our group, and I think as we head towards the end of the season, these performances should build confidence when the game isn't going your way. And instead of absolving yourself of defensive responsibilities, you got everyone on the field working their tails off to keep the 3 points. And I think that's a big step for us. Again, like I say, after every game, there's a lot of stuff we need to continue to improve upon, but just really proud of the mentality of the group tonight in that second half in particular.
You mentioned, maybe not playing pretty games. It seems like William Agata, he's maybe doesn't have the prettiest plays on offense, but he seems to always be in the right place and gets the job done. The goal tonight was a great example of that. The header doesn't go, but he sticks with it, gets the goal. Is he just kind of like that gritty type of forward that is just, he's going to get his, but it's not always going to be pretty?
Yeah, I think that's Willie. He's a bulldozer in and around goal. He puts his body on the line. I think he had first contact on the corner, stayed with it. So I think his bravery in that area is really important. He's been doing well in training, and I think it's great that he got his opportunity tonight and took it. Really important goal for us, and obviously culminated in 3 points.
Pablo,
whether Caliscan was defending a lot because they were picking on him or because he happened to be matched up with a player they wanted to play through, he had to defend a lot tonight. The crowd gave him an ovation when he came off. What did you see from him?
I thought he was exceptional. I think Noel, and I've said this in the past, is one of the brightest footballers on our team. Really thinks the game. There's not a training session where he doesn't ask one of the coaches to work 1v1 defending with him. And this is a player that has always typically played in the middle of the field, and now he's going outside. And so the amount of commitment he has towards his craft, it doesn't surprise me. That the winger there is one of the most dynamic players. And then it becomes a game of psychology, right? When you go up against Noel and he stuffs you 2 or 3 times, then it starts to wane on your opponent's psychology. And I just thought his positioning, his decisions, whether he cleared it or whether he found a teammate, top level. It was by far his best performance that I've seen as a pro, but it's starting to become standard for him.
Given the fact that Ojeda's now yellow card accumulation, does Emeka and Ellie get cleared to start? Does Caliscan move inside and maybe Bodie? It's 3 games in 8 days. They're coming fast.
No, more than likely the latter will be the case. Emeka, again, we had a fight and scratch to get him dressed tonight, to get him a couple minutes. I think he can continue to improve his minutes, but again, he's been out for 6 weeks, has been training with the team now for 3 or 4 days. So I think it's a bit of a stretch, and really in either of these 2 games to get a start. So again, next guy has to step up. Bodie's going to come in. Noel's got to play the middle of the field, and the other part of that too. I think Pablo had a really good performance tonight with the ball, against the ball, and I think he's gaining confidence, gaining fitness, and starting to see the Pablo Ruiz before these injuries, which is really exciting for the group. So we'll see how the dust settles after tonight, and put the group out there that we feel is going to be the best for this game against Portland.
You've talked about mentality a lot this season. How did that show up in tonight's match for you guys?
Yeah, like I said, I think in the beginning of the season when we weren't good with the ball, there was oftentimes 2 or 3 players that would absolve themselves of the defensive work, and I think that also happens because you're getting results. And so we can talk about these things from a coaching perspective. I think the group feels as one. In other words, like everyone has a role to play to make this thing move forward. The amount of work that Diego and Ari and Willie did and Gozo defensively was critical tonight. We don't take those 3 points, we probably end up losing that game. So, that's what I mentioned to the group is that life will throw curveballs at you, the game will throw curveballs at you, and ask real questions. And tonight, I think the guys answered them really well.
And then what does a win like this do for the group heading into the next stretch of games for you guys?
Yeah, again, I think it's the confidence piece. We keep talking about, before we got back from the break, we needed 10 wins to put ourselves in contention for the playoff spot. And I think we got 3 out of the last 4. And again, I think it starts confidence, momentum, and then also how your opponents start to perceive you as different. And I think that's a huge factor in this. So again, a real gritty performance, definitely not something you chalk up on the board. But again, I think the human spirit trumps tactics any day of the week, and the guys showed it in spades tonight.
Pablo, congrats on the win again. I want to ask you about the formation. It seems like the formation today was more like a 4-2-4, more attacking. Is that because of the way Houston was set in the game, or something new that you tried today?
Just a little bit of both. I think the one thing that we've changed coming into break was, putting two players up there that can stretch. And that's worked really well. And then putting Luna and Diogo in a position that I feel they really enjoy, playing underneath. At times they got a little bit wide. And so, again, this is our first go at it, but really want them in positions where we can break lines and turn and then release forwards or release our outside backs. And so I think for our first run offensively, I think the first 25 minutes were really solid. But when you don't have a lot of the ball, you spend a lot of energy chasing it. And you got to take your hat off to Houston. They're a really good team. The result last week against San Diego away from home speaks volumes of what they're capable of. And so, again, I'm really proud of the way we handled them. But we'll continue to fine-tune that and see if we can't make those 25 minutes more like 70, 75 as we progress forward.
My other question is, 2 games, 2 goals off of set pieces. Is that just the fruit of the product of the guys working in training, or just a little bit of luck as well?
Well, it's a little bit of everything. The universe is a crazy thing. I'd have a hard time explaining how that works. But we've been really deliberate in our training of set pieces, and I think for any piece, you got to have a good ball put in a very dangerous area, and then you have to be brave. And I think on the goal tonight, Pablo put in a good ball in a dangerous area. Willie had first contact and then got the rebound. So it's a bit of fortune, but you have to be consistent where the ball's being delivered and the guys being brave enough to capitalize on it.
We're going to toss it to Maddie over on Zoom. Maddie, go ahead.
Hey, Pablo. Earlier in the year, it seemed like there were a lot of games where RSL was dropping points in the flukiest and weirdest of ways. What does it say to you about the group's grit, their belief in the process, their trust in each other and in the staff, that you all stayed together, nobody ever put their heads down, and now that's two in a row where you're getting these 1-goal wins? Yeah,
that's a great question, Maddie. I think when you suffer as much as we did in the first part and felt so hard done by, whether it was red cards or, giving up late PKs, whatever the case of, I think when you suffer enough, you have 2 choices. One, you can go on your own and go rogue, or you can band together and take those experiences as a learning moment. I couldn't be more proud of the group, and just a great leadership group, a great group of guys that really want to make our fans proud and our club proud. And that's something that's spoken about often. And I think tonight's gritty performance is a reflection of that.
Thank you. And then last one for me, with the match coming up so quick on Wednesday, what does it mean for you seeing the guys coming off the bench put in such strong performances for the group?
Yeah, I think that's another aspect of our team that's changed drastically since the beginning part of the season, where there was moments where we just weren't getting a spark. I think these guys tonight came in and did a wonderful job. Ari, Phil, all the guys that came in did a fantastic job. Vera, and so again, I think in the beginning of the season there was a lot of questions of some of the how we can change the game from the guys coming into the game in critical moments. Are we up a goal? So what's the focus? We got to first it's maintain the lead. Second is to try to find the second goal, not the other way around. And so I think tonight the guys really took it upon themselves to dig in a difficult game and find a way to get a result. So super proud of them and grateful for the book you handed over to me. I started digging into it today, and I think there's a lot to take away from that book. So grateful to you, Maddie, for enlightening me on the study of Zen, which is I love that space.
Thank you so much.
Pablo, early on, Goza was getting behind all the time. We're seeing less of that. We saw almost none of it tonight. Is that because of the way teams are defending him, but he's aware of his speed? He's also doing a lot of deep defending, so maybe he's just not in position. What's happening?
Yeah, well, no, again, I think Gozo's still doing a good job. There's a couple plays where he was on, but we weren't looking for it. But I think that's the mechanism, right? If you have stretch, the back line has a choice. You can drop with them. So the way we want to break that down is if Gozo's on, play it. You're in on goal. If he's not down, that means the back line is dropped. You should find your 10s. And that's what I was talking about a little earlier about our 10s being too wide at times. If we're in central positions now, we get it. He recirculates his run, and now he's running off a back shoulder of a center back. So, and then with Goza again, he's been playing so far above the expectations. It's incredible. And he's still obviously learning a lot on the fly. And teams might, they're probably going to play him a little bit more man-to-man. And so we have to find a mechanism as a team that if he's opening space for people, we got to find those people that are open, which will be Diego and Diogo, and then find him on the second action. So he's doing great. And I think the defending part is something that he's still trying to come to terms with. Is we tweak things from game to game, and for a young man that's prides himself on being a great attacking player, the defensive part is also really important. So again, I'm really proud of Gozo, and obviously, he's been an impetus to the results in the last 4 games.
When you did get him the ball, it seemed to come through Caliscan. It seemed like there were wide spaces, and on the left side for Catranas too. Are teams going to pack in the middle of the field? Are they scared of Luna? Because it seems like there's 2 defenders every time he gets the ball. There's 2 defenders stepping to him. Yeah.
So again, I think that's what we have to iron out as we continue with this way of playing. Is anytime our outside backs, because they're in an advanced position, if their outside back releases, we have a 1v1 with a forward. If the timing is good and the pass is good, and I think those passes from our outside backs almost need to lead Gozo to goal as opposed to straight balls, right? A little bit more diagonal so that when he turns on them, he's right in front of him. And those are the questions they have to ask. If not, then Noel and Alex have time to walk up the field. And more times than not, we want them looking inside. Because we have so many numbers in there, even if we give the ball away, we should have a good repressing opportunity for us and then continue the attack going forward.
There's Pablo Mastroeni in the post game. Hey, a reminder. Don't miss your chance to win big every week on The Zone. This week on Win Tickets Wednesday, you could win tickets to see The Offspring in the Supercharged Worldwide and 25 Tour, September 6th at the Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater. The Offspring with special guests Jimmy Eat World and Newfound Glory. Get your tickets now at livenation.com. Listen to The Zone all day Wednesday for your chance to win. Coming up next, Utah Athletic Director Mark Harlan from the Big 12 Media Days. Stay with us.
Mark Harlan, Athletic Director for the University of Utah. Mark, we missed you here in person, man, but thanks for joining the program. Hey, Mark.
Hey, guys. Yeah, I heard PK was going to be there, and I was like, I got other things I can get done up here, so I thought I'd call in.
I love it. He avoided PK.
That was nice of you to.
Oh, am I talking to Whittingham here? What is it?
Whit did just harass PK for the last few minutes.
Mark, I was going to take you out to the finest steakhouse tonight, man. It was going to be on me.
Oh, wow.
For the first time.
I didn't know, but I did do you guys a favor. I was driving to a meeting, and I could tell that you guys are getting a little annoyed by my guy's swoop, so I did send a text.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
My favorite thing is that Hans got a lap dance from Swoop at Big 12 Media Days. It
was rough.
It was my favorite thing that happened.
I'm going to hold to this. I really do think that Devin Dampierre's brother was in that Swoop costume, running as the hype man.
Oh, that was amazing.
I thought, you know what? There's many things the AD has to do, but I pulled over and sent a quick text. So did he fly away?
He
or is he still in your grill?
I was going to say, I thought that maybe you had sent the text to go over. Here's what Hans looks like. Let's go get him.
Go find him.
Mark, we were just having a conversation because yesterday we chatted with Brian Santiago, and he said, you know what, and we asked him about the relationship that he's already had with you and just trying to kind of get into that role down at BYU, and he said, you know what, one of the first people who, when I got off the plane in Orlando for those business meetings, was Mark Harlan, and he put his arm around me, and we chatted about, some of the things, and he just talked about the hospitality of it. How important is that to you to make sure that, all the ADs seem to have a pretty good relationship, but obviously a new one comes into the fold, even if it's down at the team down south, you're gonna put your arm around him and say, hey man, welcome to the club.
Yeah, no, he's a really good man. I got great appreciation for somebody that started where he did in that organization and just grinded and worked his way up. And these are tough jobs, but they're tough in the job he's had too. So I've got great appreciation for him. And Tom had always told me how Brian was such an important part of the organization. It's kind of like Charmel Green is here in my senior group. So yeah, Brian and I really got a chance to steal away and just talk about a lot of different things. And he joked about how different the chair is and how it already feels. And, we talked a little bit about that. But, the secret is, and you guys know, like Tom and I would talk all the time about stuff. And it's going to be the same way with Brian because we got issues we got to solve together. We compete, we compete in the living rooms as we joke around, and we compete on the fields and courts. But everything else, we're kind of aligned in the things that need to happen. There's a lot of legislative issues that he and I went and saw a bunch of legislators on the Hill. Tom and I were just in, before he retired, we were just in D.C. together meeting with the senators. I mean, that stuff's really important. And we both, I think both of us being really good is important on the field. And doesn't mean we won't want to get after them, just like they want to get after us. But we work a lot. So maybe the secret's out now, right?
Mark, I'm curious because we had Kyle Whittingham and he was just sitting in the chair a little bit ago, and we were talking back and forth about his years in the business, and he was talking about hiring Coach Beck, and he said, I brought in Morgan Scally because he's coaching waiting. I felt like he was owed that. I want to go back to the contract negotiations with Morgan Scally and the decisions by you and Kyle and that front office to issue him the coach in waiting. Kind of walk us through that process and what that meant to you and what that meant to Morgan in that time.
Yeah, well, I just this whole thing that we do is all about people that are talented and people that care about young people, whether they're coaching or whether they're administrator, right? I mean, that's the thing. And so when you have somebody of the talents of Morgan, you gotta make sure that you do everything you can to keep that person in place and continue to provide the value to the organization. It's pretty simple, leadership 101 about surrounding everybody with the best you can. So really, two things came to mind, and they were all based on the fact that I knew how good Morgan was. Remember, this is my 9th season coming up. I've been around Morgan for a long time. Crazy. And I, Whit and I had talked about it off and on the first 3 or 4 years I was here. Fast forward, listen, the guy gets calls, right? Let's just be candid. I mean, He's the best defensive coordinator in the country. and time and time again. So he's getting calls, and so it made sense for us to really think about the future with Morgan, and that's where we really started diving into it. And coaching waiting comes with good and bad and everything in between, and I recognize that. Bad because things can get weird at any different time, but I knew Morgan would be able to handle any of that. So it's just made a lot of sense for us. The second thing, it's really helped us, and we really have noticed this in this recruiting class. This is coming together to be one of our better classes we've had in a while. That comes up, and for a parent to see who's next, whenever next is a real asset to the organization, and we've really seen that over these last couple of recruiting cycles. So anyway, it just made a lot of sense, and it's nice in this world of instability. It's nice to have that kind of stability as we move forward.
We had the House settlement, and I know you guys, University of Utah's all in with the $20.5 million, but you also got the NIL with this other commission that you're going to have to run stuff through. Stories are starting to come out now with Texas Tech, with their big money, giving guys 3-year deals and all that stuff, and you're like, well, what's going on here? There's a lot of confusion, so I'm going to ask you a question. How much clarity do you have about the whole situation? Because it seems like it's all over the map.
I would say I put it in two categories. What is clarity for me and the organization is certainly the cap. That's a big deal. Don't want to underestimate that. The fact that everybody can spend 20.5. If you go over, there's $7 million+ penalties. This is a federal settlement. This isn't just some negotiating in a back room. This is a federal signed by a federal judge settlement. So excited about that. Excited that payroll, if you want to call it that, began here last Tuesday. And we're settling into that, and that's a big change. That's helpful. In terms of NIL, listen, I think that the NIL Go program is very interesting. We've been on it now for a month. Our athletes submit their deals. They get rejected or they don't. Most of them have been accepted. That's a range of compensation. It's a very slick system, very easy, and all that's great. The thing that's not totally clear is how is compliance going to be handled. I like the structure of it in terms of the new president. I think he's really talented. I think he's surrounding himself with a great team. But until they go after somebody that's blatantly cheating, i.e. not submitting their NIL deals or promising a junior in high school these things, all the things that are going on, the coaches are going to continue to be, and as such the athletic director is very suspect that we did all this work when there's not compliance. So until someone is nailed and proven, and that coach is suspended, and that kid is taken off the field, or whatever might happen, the coaches are going to just be shaking their heads. So I'm hopeful. This is outside the NCAA. They have subpoena power. There's more teeth than I've seen, but we got to see it happen.
Yeah. Mark, we've been talking a lot about scheduling, a ton about scheduling, and I know you got UCLA out of the gates, and we talked to Brett Yormark about scheduling and the importance it plays for this conference and stability. And it feels like the scheduling in football is changing more towards the kind of legislature of the scheduling in basketball, where you schedule the big names, and if you lose, it's not as painful as maybe having a lesser name and struggling a little bit, maybe losing and falling completely off the face of the earth. What is your philosophy right now moving forward? And I know it's UCLA out of the gates, and that's a great game, and fans are excited about it. And we've watched some of the openings through Pac-12 where it was Michigan or Florida, and it's been good stuff through the University of Utah. But what is your philosophy, and how much do you want to try to flex with the SEC or Big Ten scheduling in the future?
Well, I think it's going to come down to a lot to where is the CFP going to fall? If we get to 16, we get to a 5-11 format, then you're definitely going to have more space to operate and be able to get in there. We already have one AQ, set up in the system. So, if that doesn't expand, then you're really going to have to be careful because, you can overschedule. There's no question. You got to be careful on that. But don't know if you guys are aware, but within the Big 12, there is you have to have that 10th game has to be, a Power 4 school. So that's contractually in there. we're always, you look at our schedule ahead, we've got, Arkansas coming in, we got LSU on the schedule, we got Wisconsin on the schedule. I think that's really important for our fan base. It's important for our program. But a big part of your question is going to be answered for all of us if this thing moves to 16. Because then you could start thinking about that 11th game maybe even being another big game. But we'll wait and see where that goes.
Part of it has to do with how much teams get penalized for losses in football versus basketball, where you're encouraged to make these big time rolls of the dice on other opponents, and you're not dinged as hardcore. Obviously there's a lot more games, but yeah, a 16-team playoff, that's going to add to it. Brett Yormark brought up the strength of places like Utah and how additive you guys have been to this conference. And when you look at what, I can't believe it's year 9, by the way, that you're going into this thing. It's crazy. But as you see this thing going, how much has this program grown in this last few years, and obviously getting into the Big 12, and how much more growth do you think can happen in the short term here for this Utah program?
Well, listen, our ceiling continues to be very high, and we've just established such credibility. The brand has grown. You don't go to back-to-back Rose Bowls and back-to-back championships without the whole nation knowing. Obviously last year was a difficult year. It happens in sports. The way we're investing, the way Kyle's been able to keep this staff together and make hard changes when he's needed to. We're selling out again. We sold out again season tickets. We got the infrastructure here to be great. And, the fact that we were able to retain our great players, you don't retain everybody. No one retains everybody. Texas Tech didn't retain everybody, right? That's just the way it is. And, continuing to move forward. The GM position that we've seen in basketball is also really getting up to speed in football with Kyle's staffing structure. So, we're continuing to move forward. And I think, obviously, when I went in front of the football team in January and there was 47 new guys. Now, mind you, the year before there was like 17, right? And I think the way our staff is adapting to integrate these guys in a fast way and build a team, which has been a little different for Utah, right? It really has. But I've seen how far they've come, and I just think that now we're kind of in a place where we're really ready to start thriving once again in this environment. So excited about what Coach has done and that staff, and certainly know that we got a real exciting year ahead.
Mark, no Arizona on the schedule. No Arizona on the schedule this year, and we got to make this quick. Why not?
Yeah, go ahead.
Why not play the 4 corner schools every single year in this Big 12?
Yeah, I'll be quick on this. We the 4 ADs asked for as much as we could to do that. So basically, we're always going to have at least 3 of them on the schedule on every year. More of that would have really thrown out of balance for everybody else. But if you look at it on most years ahead, this is the year we miss Arizona. But on most years we'll have them. Obviously, with us playing BYU every year, so it's way more intentional than just missing one. As long as we're getting 75% of that group, because it's good for our fans, good for travel, etc.
Yeah. There is Mark Harlan talking Ute football. All right, and really Ute athletics. DJ and PK, proudly presented by our title sponsor, Black Desert Resort, Utah's premier golf resort. When we come back, Richard Smith remembering Frank Layden. They had the funeral for him Saturday. Richard Smith coming up next. Stay with us. Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5 The Zone. Well, they had the funeral service for Frank Layden. Stockton and Malone were there. Big T. Thurl Bailey and Rich Kelly were towering over them. It was a who's who of Utah sports. You want former Utah assistant coaches. There was Gordy Chiesa was there. Currently, you got Danny Ainge, Austin Ainge running the club. They were there. Phil Johnson, another former Jazz assistant coach, was there. There were a wide range of people, tons of Jazz employees who worked behind the scenes there to remember Frank and pay him their respects. We had Richard Smith on, who worked for the club for 40 years. He was there, and we spoke with him last week. Remembering Frank, there were some great stories. Here's Smitty. Did Frank actually hire you?
Yeah, well, in a technical sense, yeah. It's actually, it's a funny story. I actually started doing some part-time game night stuff for Laura Hurlovich and the PR crew on game nights. And then when Frank took over as the head coach and he brought Scott in as his assistant, Scott and I got to know each other on a personal level. And it was Scott who one time we were at a University of Utah basketball game. We were talking about what was going on in the game and whatnot. And I asked him, hey, who keeps track of all this stuff for you guys? And he goes, oh, nobody. And I said, well, why is that? And he just shrugged like, nah, I don't know. And I said, this is some of the stuff I used to do when I was in graduate school and all this kind of stuff, tracking offense and shots and all this stuff. I said, I could do that if you guys want, if that could be of any help. He goes, oh, let me ask my dad. And so he calls me back a couple of days later. He goes, yeah, my dad said, come on down, so which is typical Frank, and so I started doing stuff behind the bench and tracking offense and offensive shots and shot chart stuff. And that kind of started the whole thing from a volunteer, non-paid, just hanging out, helping out things. One thing led to another, and every year there was a little more, hey, can you also do this other thing for us? And while you're doing that thing, and yeah, okay, and all that. And then when Jerry took over as the coach, I asked the coach if he wanted to change it and, wanted me to exit out the back door. And he goes, no, just do the same thing. Why would we change it, And that's what started that whole 40-year relationship of mine with the Jazz and with Coach Layden.
Didn't it seem so innocent in those days compared to what it is now?
Well, you know what it was, PK. It was such a smaller group. At that time when Scott came in, and you guys know, in the early mid '80s, before Larry Miller got involved, the Jazz with Sam Battistone and his ownership group, they were really teetering financially on how to run the Jazz, and that's in part why Larry Miller brought in Dave Checkett when he brought the team to try and get some financial stability with the Jazz. And for several years in the early '80s, the Jazz had trouble not only getting enough people to the games and selling tickets, but also doing a simple thing like making payroll to both the players and their employees. And but we had so few. Scott Layden, for example, when he came in, the first several years he was involved. He was on the bench as Frank's assistant coach, but he was also in charge of college scouting. He was also in charge of the draft. He was also in charge of pro scouting in case the Jazz wanted to make some kind of a trade or sign a free agent. And he was the one who was doing all of that stuff at that time, which now, when you look at those jobs, there's literally 8, 10, 12 people involved in those different areas trying to make sound decisions. And at that time, it was Frank and Scott and maybe Jack Gardner was working a little bit on the side for the Jazz after his University of Utah retirement, and a little bit of Tom Sankey from Westminster College who was helping out, and David Fredman who was doing PR stuff, but he was also doing some scouting. It was kind of everybody doing a lot of different things, and so it was more of a family type atmosphere, in part because that's the way the NBA was at the time. I mean, we all know in the 60s, Red Auerbach didn't have an assistant. He just did it himself, and with the Celtics, and then, even when you got to the 80s, people had small staff, and now you look at a bench of any NBA team during a game, and you have no idea how many coaches they have because there's so many people involved, which can be good, and also might cause some problems. As they say, there's sometimes there could be too many cooks in the kitchen.
When Frank was building the Jazz, was there ever a moment where he really knew he had something, or did success sneak up on him a little bit? Were you involved that much in those early days?
Yeah, well, when I got involved, DJ, it was interesting when you look back on it. In successive drafts in the early '80s, that he was in charge of, and then Scott kind of took over, and they kind of worked in tandem on it. But in the early '80s, think of it, the draft were 10 rounds back when I first started, and then they cut it down to 8. And then eventually down to the current 2. But at that time, you had a lot of draft picks that you had available to you, and a lot of times you didn't even know who guys were other than statistics that you had read about on them. But the successive drafts for the Jazz in the early 80s, how about this? In 1980, you get Darrell Griffith, okay? In 82, you get Dominique Wilkins, who obviously didn't come, in part because he didn't want to come, but also in part because the Jazz had money problems, and that was a way to solve some of those by selling his rights to the Atlanta Hawks. But you had Darrell Griffith, then you drafted Dominique Wilkins, then you drafted Thurl Bailey, then you drafted Bobby Hansen, then you drafted Mark Eaton, then you drafted John Stockton, then you drafted Karl Malone. That was all between 80 and 85. So Frank obviously knew what he was doing, and he knew that he had to build the team through the draft and had to do it piece by piece, step by step. And I remember in the 85 draft, I was on the stage with he and Scott, and we're looking at as the draft's unfolding. Everybody thinks that Karl Malone is going to go 5, 6, 7, and now it's pick 9, 10, 11. We have 13. I'm not sure what's going on, but Scott's saying, hey, if Malone is falling and if he gets to us, we have to take him. He's the best player that's still left. And I remember Frank saying, well, what's the matter with him? Something's wrong with him if he's fallen, right? Like he either has an injury we don't know about, or he has some kind of off-court issue that we're not aware of. And Scott said, no, I don't know of anything, but he's the best player of this group that's left. And, of course, the Washington Bullets took Kenny Green from Wake Forest at 12, and then that left Karl at 13. And so Frank says, are you sure about this? And Scott goes, yeah, no, he's the best player. We got to take him. So Frank goes, well, I hope you know what you're doing, and goes and makes the pick. And then afterwards in the interviews, somebody asked him about, hey, you hope Malone can come in and score and everything. And Frank said, well, I don't know about that. He goes, scoring's not our problem. We have enough scoring. We have Darrell Griffith. We have Adrian Dantley. We have John Drew. We have Ricky Green. We can score okay. And we have the big guy, Mark Eaton, in the middle, who's developing into a rim protector, shot blocker. But we're third to the last in the league in rebounding. So what we need from him to come in and do is really be a tenacious rebounder on both ends. And that will be his job initially, to fit in with us. And then if he scores 8 or 10 points a game, that'll be a bonus. Okay? And then whatever it is, 35,000 points later, and so that's one of those great stories where, you think you have something and you think the something is this, and then the something turns into something much greater. And everybody's going, hey, Karl Malone, hey, what a great pay. And Frank would always be the first one to say, hey, if we knew he was going to be Karl Malone, we would have traded up to try and get him.
Yeah.
You don't know what it's going to turn out to be. You just hope you've got something you can work with in some regard, and then it takes a life of its own, and it goes the way it's going to go. And we were very fortunate, obviously, back-to-back drafts with John Stockton and Karl Malone being picked at 16 and 13. And not only that they proved to be great players, proved to be great culture-type people for the Jazz organization that Frank was building, but also the fact that, 13 of the 19 years they played together, neither guy missed a game. And so they played 8 preseason games every year. They played 82 regular season, and they were in the playoffs every year. So you're talking about in the neighborhood of playing 100 games a year, and neither guy missed a game for 13 of those 19 years. That's the stuff you can't plan for.
Right. He was a commentator for Utah basketball when I was a beat writer for the newspaper, so you get an opportunity to travel, and I've been around him after that too. But speak to the level of which he treated people. It was really just amazing to be in podunk places, out-of-the-way places, Fresno, Fort Collins, or wherever, and people would come up to him, and he always had time. It was just amazing in that way, and I'm sure you saw that very thing probably a million more times than I did.
No, well, this is tough to talk about because Frank that's one of the reasons that everybody loved working with him and everybody loved working for him. And it would be hard to find someone who was working with that group at that time or any time that he was associated with the Jazz to say that they didn't love working for him, because he treated everybody, PK, exactly the same. And it wasn't a fake thing, and it wasn't a PR thing. It was just his nature and his personality, where he felt that everybody deserved equal time. Everybody deserved the proper amount of attention and respect. He always lived by, he was a great Jackie Robinson fan, as you guys know. And, he always used to love to tell the story about him skipping school on that April day when Jackie Robinson made his debut with the Brooklyn Dodgers. And he was at the game. And he wanted to see it firsthand, as he was a 15-year-old at that time. And he always lived by that mantra of Jackie Robinson's, which is, a life is only as important as the impact it has on other lives. And he lived that every day. Anytime, anywhere you went, it didn't matter. And we traveled a lot together professionally and socially. And no matter where we were, he had the time of day for anybody who would say hello. And he always greeted them with a smile and a handshake and some kind of a joke, or three women would come walking by in the hotel lobby, and they would kind of look and nod and like polite hello, and he goes, hey, is the Miss America pageant in town today? And they would bust up laughing, and but he had a million of those kind of lines, but it was always with the feeling and the effort to make people feel good. And to enjoy the moment that you have interacting together. And that's one thing I've learned from him, one thing I've tried to emulate myself. Obviously, I can't do it to the extent that he does, but he was just such a genuine person. And you talk to any of the Jazz people who worked for him in the 80s, and they would line up at the door, whatever Frank needs, whatever he's got going on, here we are, let's go. And that's who he was from beginning to end. And that was all 100% genuine. It was all real. It wasn't, hey, I'm just trying to make myself look good or something. It was from the heart, and that's what made him the person that he was.
You want to tell people what you're doing right now? Frank would approve of this.
No, so like a month ago, whatever, Frank spent the last few months in the hospital trying to get his breathing right and all of that, and we would go up and see him all the time, and said, Coach, we've been doing these baseball trips. It's my wife Linda and myself, our friends Chris Lino and Colleen Lindstrom, and Frank and Barbara Layden. And the six of us started in 2011 going on every summer, going to a different major league ballpark that somebody hasn't been to. Because Frank, for those people who don't know, was more of a baseball fan than he was a basketball fan in reality. And so we started going to a different major league ballpark every summer and spending a weekend series there. And we told them about a month ago, Coach, don't know if you're going to be able to go with us or not, but in July we're planning to go to Cincinnati to see the Reds because we haven't been to that ballpark yet. And he said, yeah, that'd be great. You guys got to do that. And make sure you bring me back some souvenirs and all this stuff. And that happened to be this week. And so yesterday, all the news and stuff about Frank's passing and talking with the family and all that kind of stuff. And we knew, there wasn't even a question about it, that this is where we're supposed to be to honor Frank by being at the ballpark last night and singing vociferously when the seventh inning stretch came on in his honor. And it couldn't be a more fitting tribute to what Frank meant to us and what he was all about.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. My wife and I are doing that. We're going to hit up Toronto as the next one. So we do the same thing, Smitty. And I know you've met my wife multiple times, and our wives know each other. And so she set that up. So that's what we'll be doing next week. And that's the thing about that, man, is Frank with that glove sitting at whatever they call the ballpark where the Bees played. We had to change names, but I have memories of him sitting there. I was calling games. I'd call games, and you'd look down the third base line, and there he would be sitting in there with that baseball glove, and just a regular old dude who was basically a national celebrity, but you wouldn't know it, and he was there just to watch the baseball game.
PK, we were at a game one time at the Bees. Frank and Barbara had seats right behind the visitors' dugout on third base.
Yep.
And he would always have his glove with him.
Yep.
And he'd be pounding his glove like as the pitch was getting ready to be made, as if he was going to make a fielding play, okay? So one game, a left-hander comes up, and he skews one right toward us, and it was a low liner, and it skims right off the top of the dugout, and we all, back away and turn our heads, whatever, and Frank just stands up, and he swipes his glove, boom, and picks it off just like the Freddie Freeman at first base. And he scoops it up, and he looks in the glove, and we go, and we're looking around like, where'd the ball? Did you get that? And he goes, what do you think this is? And he picks the ball out of the glove, and the whole place goes crazy. And but I'm telling you, it was a screamer, and he just swiped at it like any Gold Glove first baseman, and it was
Gil Hodges.
Yeah, it was awesome, And I got to tell you, I got to tell this quick anecdote, baseball related. Last month, we go to see him in the hospital, and said, Coach, we're going down to see the Dodgers now. He's very good friends with Stan Kasten, who's the president of the Dodgers. But Stan Kasten was the young, right out of law school attorney for the Atlanta Braves back in the 70s when Frank was the assistant coach of the Atlanta Hawks. And so he's known Stan Kasten since he was right out of law school. And said, we're going down to see the Dodgers. We're going to tell Stan you said hi, and Cheryl and all our Dodger friends. And he said, hey, you got to do something for me. I said, okay. So when you go, you got to get something for Omar, who's the gentleman who helps him. He and Barbara with their daily care. There's a caregiver. He and his wife Lauren Lemus, who are great people, have done a great job with Frank and Barbara in these latter days, and they take such good care of him. And he says, you got to bring back something from the Dodgers because he's a big Dodger fan. I said, okay, Coach. But he was having trouble speaking. And so we were communicating. I finally figured out that's what he wanted. So I go to Dodgers and I bring back a bunch of stuff and give it to Omar. And he said, oh, this is great, Smitty. Oh, I love it. Oh. And I said, hey, Omar, it isn't me. I said, this is Frank. I'm just the courier. I said, Frank instructed me to do this. And so that's what I did. And so he's the guy. He goes, oh, Frank, thank you. Oh, this is unbelievable. This is great. And Frank just smiled and gave a fist pump in the air. I mean, in his hospital bed, not being able to make these kind of trips, like we always have, he was still trying to figure out what he could do for somebody else.
Yeah.
And make somebody else's day.
Great story.
And that's how he was literally right up to the end.
Yep.
He was always thinking about, what can I do for you? How can I do something that brings a smile to your face? And that's who he was, and that was it.
Beautiful life that he lived. What a man.
Yeah, unbelievable. 93 years, right?
Yep.
93, and he's one that you guys you could actively and accurately say he was 93 years young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Smitty, we appreciate the time. You can get back to Cincinnati and checking off ballparks. And thanks for coming on and sharing some memories with Frank, about Frank.
Good to visit with you guys. And we all love Frank and Barbara so much. And the Salt Lake community and the state of Utah are better off because they chose to make their home there after his career was over, and enrich our community so much with what they did in their charitable endeavors and just how they carried themselves as icons in our community. And we all know he'll be dearly, dearly missed by everybody.
Well said, brother.
Thank you, Smitty.
Thank you, guys.
There is Richard Smith. We're going to take a break. When we come back, what is trending? The headlines are next.